The sound began as a rhythm, metal against ceramic, the dull, repetitive scrape of a fork moving across a plate. It was the only sound in the room, distinct and sharp against the backdrop of heavy air. There were 4 people at the table, 4 distinct postures, but for the last 60 seconds, no one had spoken. The silence was not a pause. It was not the natural gap between sentences or the quiet comfort of familiarity. It was a physical weight. It pressed down on the centerpiece, a low arrangement of dried flowers that no one was looking at. It pressed against the windows, where the reflection of the room was clearer than the night outside. The man at the head of the table cut his meat. He did it with unnecessary precision. His elbows were tucked tight against his ribs, minimizing his footprint in the shared space. He chewed, swallowed, and patted the corner of his mouth with a linen napkin. He did not look up. To his right, a woman held the stem of her wine glass. She wasn't drinking. She was rotating the glass back and forth, a quarter turn each way. Her eyes were fixed on the movement of the red liquid swirling against the crystal. She was waiting. Across from her, another man sat with his back perfectly straight, but his feet were tucked back under the chair, heels raised, resting on the balls of his feet. It was the posture of someone ready to stand up and leave, yet he remained frozen. The silence grew louder. It wasn't empty. It was full of things that had almost been said. In a room like this, eye contact becomes a dangerous currency. The woman with the wine glass lifted her head just an inch. Her gaze traveled across the tablecloth, navigating around the salt cellar, past the untouched bread basket. She aimed for the face of the man opposite her. But just as her eyes reached his chin, he reached for his water. The glass obscured his face. The connection was broken before it happened. She looked away, retreating to the safety of her plate. This is the choreography of discomfort. It is a dance of avoidance. The air conditioner hummed, a low, mechanical drone that usually fades into the background. Now it was the loudest thing in the world. It covered the sound of breathing, but it could not cover the tension. The man at the head of the table cleared his throat. It was a small sound, a friction of vocal cords, but it acted like a gunshot. All 3 other heads turned slightly, instinctively toward him. He didn't speak. He simply adjusted his cuff. He pulled the white fabric down a fraction of an inch, ensuring it was visible past the sleeve of his jacket. The movement was a distraction, a way to occupy his hands while his mind calculated the risk of speaking. He decided against it. The heads turned back. The moment passed. The silence reassembled itself, thicker than before. Quiet is rarely peaceful. Often quiet is aggressive. The woman to the left finally moved. She placed her silverware down. She didn't place it gently. She let the handle of the knife hit the rim of the plate with a sharp clack. It was a signal. In the language of this specific silence, it was a challenge. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. This opened her chest to the room, but closed her off from the table. She looked directly at the man at the head of the table. She didn't blink. She waited for him to acknowledge the noise she had made. He continued to eat. His refusal to look up was not an accident. It was a countermove. By ignoring the sound, he denied her the reaction she demanded. He kept his rhythm steady, cut, lift, chew. He was weaponizing his calm. The woman's jaw tightened. You could see the muscle work beneath the skin of her cheek. She took a breath, a sharp intake of air through her nose, preparing to launch a sentence into the void. Her lips parted. The other 2 guests froze. The man with the raised heels stopped chewing. The woman with the wine glass stilled her hand. They braced for impact, but the sentence didn't come. The woman with the crossed arms exhaled slowly, the air hissing slightly between her teeth. She turned her head toward the window, defeated by the lack of engagement. The danger receded, but the atmosphere remained charged. The energy in the room was static, prickly. It was the feeling of walking across a carpet in socks, knowing that the next thing you touch will shock you. Time behaves differently in these moments. A minute stretches, thinning out until it feels transparent. The man opposite the woman with the wine glass finally broke his stillness. He reached for the pitcher of water. His hand was shaking. It was a subtle tremor, a high-frequency vibration that was invisible until he tried to lift the weight of the glass pitcher. Ice shifted inside the pitcher. Clink, clink. He poured. He focused entirely on the stream of water, terrified of spilling a drop. To spill now would be to admit that the atmosphere was affecting him. It would be a confession of weakness. He filled the glass to the brim. Too full. Now he couldn't lift it without spilling. He had trapped himself. He stared at the water, realizing his error. He left the glass on the table and withdrew his hand. He wiped his palm on his trousers, a quick, jerky motion hidden below the table edge. No one commented on the overfilled glass. No one offered to help. To acknowledge his small failure would be to acknowledge the tension causing it. So they all participated in a collective blindness. They saw it and they pretended they didn't. This is the labor of maintaining silence. It requires active participation from everyone. It is a group project. Everyone must agree to suspend reality, to act as if the air isn't thin, to act as if they aren't suffocating. The woman with the wine glass finally took a sip. She swallowed hard. The sound of the swallow was audible. She winced just slightly, as if the wine had turned into vinegar. The meal was not finished, but the eating had stopped. The plates were still half full. The food was growing cold, the sauces congealing, the vegetables losing their color. The table was a landscape of unfinished business. The man at the head of the table placed his napkin on the table. He didn't fold it. He dropped it, a crumpled heap of white linen next to his plate. He pushed his chair back. The legs of the chair dragged against the hardwood floor. A long, low groan of wood on wood. He stood up. He did not say, "Excuse me." He did not say, "Thank you." He simply rose to his full height, buttoned his jacket, and looked down at the group. For a second, it seemed he might finally speak. He looked at the woman with the crossed arms. His expression was blank, smoothed over by years of practice. There was no anger in his face, only a profound fatigue. He turned and walked away. His footsteps were heavy. Thud, thud, thud. They receded down the hallway, moving toward the front door. The three remaining people did not look at each other. They looked at the empty chair. The leather still held the impression of his back. The crumpled napkin sat there like a surrender flag. They heard the front door open, the rush of outside air, the distant sound of a passing car. Then the heavy click of the latch sliding into place. He was gone. The silence should have broken. The tension should have snapped. But it didn't. The woman with the crossed arms did not relax. She stared at the empty doorway. The man with the overfilled water glass did not drink. The silence shifted. It changed from a silence of anticipation to a silence of aftermath. It was the silence of a room where something has been broken, and no one has a broom. The woman with the wine glass reached out and picked up a spoon. She dipped it into a bowl of something she didn't want. She lifted it to her mouth. The rhythm resumed, metal against ceramic. Clink, scrape. The room remained exactly as it was. Nothing had been resolved. Nothing had been said. The weight was still there, sitting in the empty chair, dining with them. They continued to sit. They continued to stare. And the silence continued to fill the room, leaving no space for anything else.